Look, I'm just like you guys. You probably don't want to waste any money. So when it comes to bang for the buck, the two best cameras on the market right now are the Blackmagic 4K and 6K Pocket Cinema cameras. But which one should you buy? In this video, we're going to break down these two cameras and I'll tell you the differences and why I think one is actually a better buy than the other. What's good, creative fan? Brandon Washington here. And first of all, if you're brand new to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button because this channel is all about filmmaking gear, tips, and tutorials. But as I mentioned before, in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K versus the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. Now, each of these two cameras are absolutely amazing, especially in what they do for the value. Now, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything that's ever come out quite like these two cameras. When it comes to being able to give you high resolution such as 4K and 6K and giving you the flexibility of RAW in these bodies, especially for their price points, there's really nothing that compares to them other than each other. Well, that's why we're gonna look in this video why each of these cameras is good, what I don't like about each of these two cameras, and ultimately which of these two cameras you should be picking up. Now, I've had each of these cameras for quite a while, so I've had some time to really test them out. And so the first thing I want to jump into, and probably the thing that you're most interested in, is quality. Now, when it comes to the difference between the two in terms of quality, you're not just getting 6K as far as resolution with this model, but you're also getting a bigger sensor. So you are going to be getting a Super 35mm sensor compared to the Micro Four Thirds sensor on this guy. That's going to allow you to get a couple different things. Obviously the 6K resolution, but also with a bigger sensor, you also have more flexibility in low light shooting. Because you have a technically bigger sensor, it allows for more surface area for light to actually hit the sensor to allow you to get better low light performance in a camera like the 4K that has already had great low light up to this point. The other big benefit when shooting with the 6K sensor is if you're shooting for a 4K timeline, you now have some extra room as far as being able to, reframe your shot in post. Now, that extra 2K, is it really helpful in that area? That's going to totally be up to you and how much reframing you're planning on doing. I mean, it's not as big a jump from 4K to 1080. I will say that little bit of extra reframing room is nice to have in the edit. Now, another big question that pops up when shooting with 6K is, well, is 6K going to just wreck my computer? Will I even be able to play back the footage? And I can say that, yeah, you actually can, and it actually plays back really smooth. One thing I was really surprised with, after I was able to upgrade my Blackmagic RAW player on my computer, I was actually able to play back the 6K footage in real time without any dropped frames. And I don't think my computer is that powerful. It is a couple years old, but I was super surprised with how well my computer was able to play back this footage. Now, as far as looking at the 6K footage on a regular 1080 screen, whether you're looking at the 6K versus the 4K on a 1080 screen or on a cell phone screen, honestly, I really couldn't tell that big of a difference. I mean, yes, the 6K was a little bit sharper, and you guys might be able to tell the difference between these shots online, but after compression and playing it back on a lower resolution screen, realistically, the difference between 4K and 6K really wasn't that big. And so since there wasn't a massive difference between the two, another question I've been getting is, well, since the 6K can only shoot 6K in Blackmagic RAW, is it worth editing it in DaVinci, or is it worth using that RAW workflow? Personally, I think working with DaVinci, for me at least, hasn't been the easiest thing. Obviously, it is a brand new software and I have not mastered it yet and really haven't had enough time to really give my honest opinions on DaVinci just yet. But I will say that when you are taking this file or when you're taking the Blackmagic RAW file into DaVinci, DaVinci handles it very well. So if there's not a massive difference between the 4K and the 6K as far as the quality of these two cameras, then how's the usability? And this is honestly where these two cameras differ the most. If you saw my last little rant video going off about the 6K, you already know that there are some limitations when it comes to the 6K. Now, a lot of you guys let me know in the comments that trying to shoot 6K ProRes really isn't a smart thing to do anyway, and if you're getting the Blackmagic, you should definitely just be getting it for RAW, which, I do kind of believe that to a certain extent. However, when the 4K can shoot 4K ProRes and 4K RAW, but the 6K cannot shoot 4K RAW, it is a little bit of a bummer, especially when you don't necessarily always want to shoot in 6K. As I mentioned, when you're shooting in 6K on this camera in RAW, you're going to get file sizes that are about 7 to 8 gigs for a minute. But when you're shooting in this guy in 4K RAW, you're getting file sizes that are more like around 3.8 gigs to about 5 gigs or so, which significantly is smaller, especially when you start adding them up. So sometimes you may not want to shoot in 6K. You might just want to shoot in 4K for the file sizes, depending on what you're shooting. And that is one of the big issues that I have when it comes to shooting with either one of these cameras. Now, as far as the menus go on these cameras, they're the exact same. They're super easy. They're very flushed out. It's nice to be able to shoot on them. They also have the exact same I/O ports, so you don't have to worry about any differences there. So if you've liked what you've seen on the 4K as far as the usability of it, using that on the 6K is going to be the exact same, minus those differences when it comes to the different recording options, whether you're shooting in 6K, 4K, the anamorphic modes, and if you want to shoot in ProRes or in Blackmagic RAW. Now, one major difference that when shooting with these two cameras is, as I mentioned already, with the 6K, it does have that built-in EF mount, which is really great, and it does have that super 35mm sensor, but that does limit you to a 35mm sensor. Now, my friend Dave Mays over on the Kinotika channel did send me this link to this product that you could actually like insert to this thing to make it full frame. I don't really know anything about that yet. You guys can definitely do some research and let me know what you think on that. But I will say that when shooting with the 4K camera, you can get adapters like I have on here, which right now I have the Metabone Speed Booster. So what this does is this actually converts the Micro Four Thirds mount to an EF mount, and then it's also a speed booster. So what that means is it's actually gonna allow in more light and allow this camera to have the look of a full frame camera, which is really, really nice, especially if you're used to shooting on full frame DSLRs and mirrorless. This is gonna give you more so the look that you're used to shooting with. And last but not least, because I know a couple guys have been asking me some questions, when it comes to the battery life, the 4K versus the 6K, they're both terrible. So, I mean, if you're comparing them to mirrorless cameras and DSLRs, which is kind of the price range that they're kind of found themselves in, the battery life is not very good. However, as someone who has been doing a lot of comparison with these cameras versus like the Arri Alexa and the Red cameras, ironically, most of those cameras only last about an hour to an hour and a half, and that is with a big V-mount battery. So the fact that these cameras are getting an hour with these little bitty Canon batteries is honestly right on par with most cinema cameras. But I will say that if you did choose to use a V-mount battery with one of these, which I have an entire video breaking down my setup and how I use a V-mount battery with these cameras, if you do want to use a V-mount battery, you're pretty much going to be able to shoot all day. So the battery life isn't that bad if you compare it to like a cinema camera, but if you compare it to like a mirrorless camera, then yeah, they're both bad. It doesn't matter. Like there's a couple minutes difference, but really they're about the same. The only way I can really break it down as far as which one should you buy is if you are someone who's been shooting on 6K consistently and that is just your workflow, whether that's on like a Red Scarlet 6K and you're just used to that and you want to keep 6K for graphic work, if you just want that extra resolution for reframing, then yeah, buy the 6K, you won't be upset. Of course, you will have to learn DaVinci if you don't already know it, or you'll have to figure out a workaround, whether that's using the patch that's good for Premiere, or if you're taking your footage into DaVinci and then doing some coloring or making some adjustments with the raw files and then exporting as a ProRes and then taking it into Final Cut, which is an entire workflow that I have broken down before. So if you guys want to know how I do that, let me know down in the comments below. I'll teach you guys how I actually use RAW with DaVinci with Final Cut. But if you are someone who is needing 6K, then yes, this is an amazing camera. You're not going to be upset. You're going to love the EF mount on it. The super 35mm sensor is kind of the norm when it comes to most cinema cameras, so you'll get used to that pretty quickly. However, if you don't need 6K and 4K is more than enough for you, and you're saying, well, should I just spend the extra money to just go to 6K just because? I would have to say no. I honestly think that the 4K is a more versatile camera minus having the 6K. I mean, everything that this camera got with the software update, the 4K is going to get. All the anamorphic modes, you're going to be able to get that on the 4K. It can shoot ProRes and Blackmagic RAW in all different resolutions. The other thing is that with the Micro Four Thirds mount, you can get an adapter to allow you to use EF lenses or even Nikon lenses or especially PL lenses if you want to get into some more cinema glass. which is just a more versatile mount. On top of that, the difference, like I said before, between 4K and 6K really isn't that much. And so for the price, you could buy this camera with the mount and still be less than what you would spend on the 6K. And now you have the exact mount that you want. And you also can, decide if you want it to be Super 35 or full frame. So, for the price, honestly, between the two cameras, I do still lean towards the 4K. So if you are someone who owns the 4K and you've been thinking like, man, should I sell my 4K and upgrade to the 6K? Or maybe you're someone who has a 4K and you've been thinking you need another camera and you're thinking, well, I might as well get the 6K. If you don't find yourself needing 6K, realistically, just buy another 4K. You'll be more than happy. I have both cameras and I do like them for their own individual things. But personally, for what I use, the 6K really isn't necessary. Like, I don't need 6K for what I do. My clients don't really call for it. YouTube definitely doesn't call for it. So for me, the 6K isn't necessary, although it has been a cool camera to get and to play around with. And that's really what I like to do. I like to buy cameras and like to test them out. And I mean, that's the whole reason why I do this YouTube channel. And that way I can inform you guys that way you can make, a wise decision on what you should do. But that's just one man's opinion. If you have a different opinion, leave it down in the comments below. Trust me, I know you're probably already down there leaving comments anyway. But if you guys have any other questions about the differences between these two cameras, definitely leave those down there as well. I'd love to answer them for you. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.